Kevin, welcome.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Kevin Bupp. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sunrise Capital Investors. We're a private, boutique real estate equity firm that invests in two different niches. One being manufactured housing communities. We own communities in 18 different states, and then also parking investments. Think of parking garages or parking lots. Ones that we park in downtown probably quite often. Those are our two verticals. However, I've been a full-time real estate investor for over 20 years now. I bought my first property at the age of 20, and I'm 45 now, and so I've been at this, 2.5 decades, and it's all I've ever done, and it's what I love. So I've been through many different iterations of the business. I started with single family, like a lot of folks do. Built up quite a big portfolio of a few hundred single family properties in my early to mid 20s. Got into multifamily shortly thereafter, and then ventured into various types of commercial real estate. I've owned just about every type, self storage, medical office, retail, industrial, assisted living. I mean, you name it. I've either owned it or might even have some in my portfolio, my personal portfolio today. But as far as the company, where we spend our energy and focus is again manufactured housing communities and parking investments. At present time, we've got about 350 million of assets under management, and are having fun each and every day doing what we do.
Very cool. So you still own the single family homes in your personal
I do
portfolio?
not. No, I do
Uh,
not own single family anymore. That is one asset class outside of my primary residence I live in, and
mm,
we've got another vacation property that we use as a family. Outside of that, that is the only single family I have. No, the single family stuff kind of went bye bye. Most of it in '08. Lost pretty much everything I had built up during the '08 crash,
mm.
and rebuilt again, and ultimately rebuilt entirely the second time around. Rebuilt entirely with commercial real estate, with a predominant focus with mobile home parks. And then about 6 years ago, we brought parking investments into our fray.
Okay. So then after the '08 crash, what made you decide to pivot to a different asset class?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. As I'd mentioned, I owned single family, and I had started buying before the crash. I'd started buying other types of commercial real estate, kind of dabbling. And I happened to own a few hundred multifamily doors, a lot of smaller, 12 unit, 24 unit. The biggest apartment complex we had was a 72 unit property. And most of those were in partnerships where I was just mostly money. I wasn't necessarily involved in the day to day or the property management. I was a partner, but I was kind of more of a silent partner.
Mm,
And what I realized is that I ended up acquiring in just a few short years about almost 2.5 times the amount of doors and overall top line revenue in those multifamily properties than what it had taken me, 6, 7 years to build up in single family stuff. Buying one single family home at a time. I mean, it takes quite a bit of work to build a big portfolio in that manner. And
mm,
so when the crash happened, I lost mostly everything, had to rebuild. I was trying to be more efficient, right? I was trying to do things, trying to find scale again in a more efficient way. And I originally had decided to go down the path of multifamily and just build out a large scale multifamily organization. A couple of reasons for that. Number one, just, there's economies of scale with having multiple units underneath the rooftop, right, in one collective area. But on top of that, it also scale from a revenue perspective. Building out an organization is really difficult to be a one man band to do everything yourself, and you kind of have to do that until you get to a certain period of having enough revenue to justify making hires, right?
mm,
Um, and so I knew that I'd be able to get there much quicker again and be able to start building out a team because you can't do everything. I mean, you only have so much bandwidth and only so many hours in a day, and so I also saw multifamily as a way to get there quicker, to actually buy a couple properties and literally start hiring, folks on the team that I could
mm,
delegate to, and that just there's ultimately people on my team today that do, their jobs way better than I would ever be able to do them, right? Like
mm.
bringing experts in respective parts of the business. So I knew that I could get there fast by purchasing larger properties. The multifamily was going to be that focus. However, I just accidentally ran across mobile home parks. I wasn't looking for, I had never considered mobile home parks as an investment. This is kind of back in 2011. I took a couple year hiatus after '08 happened. It's been about 3 years, like running damage control, just managing the chaos that
Mm.
had ensued. And I didn't buy that first property on my second go around until beginning of 2012. And so, but in 2011, I was talking to a lot of folks within the industry, trying to get an understanding of what the new landscape looked like in the real estate world. And during that exploratory journey, I guess you could say, I was introduced to a guy by the name of Randy, and Randy happened to own mobile home parks. And again, I had my mind fixated on multifamily. This was going to be the path forward, to
Mhm.
rebuild. And after having a 2 hour lunch meeting with Randy, where he, gave me all the insights on mobile home parks, why they're a great asset class, and why they're kind of overlooked, and why I should really consider that and not multifamily. I left that 2 hour lunch meeting, and I kind of committed to myself that I was going to go buy a mobile home park to see whether or not what Randy had touted so highly was actually true, and so that happened. Like it took me again about a year. 2012 it took me a year from when I met Randy to buy that first park, and I haven't looked back since. So I bought the first park, turned it around, bought the second park, bought the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and now I think we've owned and or operated over 50 parks. We've gone full cycle on 20. We're typically buy and hold guys, and so when we buy things, we like to have the idea that we're going to hold it for a very long time. However, we have exited a number of properties over the years for various
Mhm.
reasons, but we still love the asset class. It's definitely not as under the radar as what it used to be. Now
Yeah.
everyone knows about it. Lots of competition, and for good reasons, right? I mean, it's a
Mhm.
great asset class. So
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I've run into with single family homes is it's hard to scale. Like we've got to 30 doors and it's great, but it's a lot of work to manage all of it. And the returns aren't exactly what I was hoping for because you still
yeah.
have maintenance and everything that you have to deal with. Um, so talk about mobile home parks. Like why is it that they are so appealing and what kind of returns do you get on those ones that have gone full cycle? Like what kind of returns are you getting on those?
Yeah, I mean, why it's an attractive asset class. I mean, everyone knows that there's such a high demand for affordable housing in this country. In most parts of the U.S., there are areas of the U.S. where you can still live affordably. You can buy a single family home for under 100 grand, and
Yeah.
but that's few and far between. Those are typically not all that desirable of areas to live. They probably have a declining population, not a lot of good job opportunities. But so generally speaking, in the growing parts of the country, affordable housing is in a massive shortage. And mobile home parks really fit that void. I feel like the best out of anything, out of any product type that's on the marketplace. You can go to any market in the country where we currently own a mobile home park today, and I can promise you that our mobile homes inside our communities are nicer than that of what you might find at like a B class apartment complex. And I can also promise you that our mobile homes, you can live in our community probably for about 25% less than the comparable, B or B plus class apartment complex. It might not have all the same amenities that apartment complex might have, like the swimming pool or a gym, which typically never get used anyway, right?
Mhm.
But what we offer is the most affordable, good quality housing within any respective marketplace. If you can't afford to live in a mobile home, again, this really applies to any market in the country. If you can't afford to live in a mobile home, then your next option really is homeless. I mean, there's not many other options. And I'm speaking more to like you and your family, right? If you're looking for like a 2 bedroom or 3 bedroom, it really is the cheapest housing option that exists in the country today. However, it's not the lowest quality. It actually, a lot of our
Mhm.
mobile homes, like I said, they're nicer than that of what the comparable apartment complexes might be, or even a rental home might be. And so that's it's an asset class that's in high demand for that reason. But then on top of that, there's not really any new supply being created. There's a lot of restrictions in place that prohibit the building of new mobile home parks throughout the country. A lot of it being municipalities. Number one is it's not a great tax basis for them. Like they take up large swaths of land, and a municipality could do a lot better by allowing just about anything else to be built there than a mobile home park. On top of that, you've got the NIMBY syndrome, not my backyard. So a lot of
Mhm.
residences, single family home neighborhoods, they don't want mobile home parks near them because in their mind they think that mobile home parks are all bad. They're going to be drug dealers and just the bad element, wrong side of the railroad track type people living there, and that is not the case at all. Like it's just the wrong stereotype that's been around for a long time that unfortunately has plagued this industry. And so there's no new supply coming in the marketplace, but yet such a high demand for this product. And so that's really the big reason why it's such a great asset class. And as far as returns, that's a loaded question. I mean, we've a lot of what we bought that we've gone full cycle on. We bought. years and years ago. And so, we've had many deals where we've gone full cycle and we've had, 100+% IRRs. I mean, which is ridiculous. Like
Wow.
it's not even, don't set expectations around that because that's not reality. That was
Mhm.
reality, if you were buying stuff 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But that's not reality today. We really, and our business model has shifted a little bit as well. We used to do really heavy turnarounds, and we're not afraid of those.
Mhm.
But they take a lot of bandwidth, and you can only do so many at a time. And so for us, we've switched to a little bit more of a higher quality product, which typically, like a core plus asset, is going to have lower returns but be lower risk. And so, today our business model really shoots for a mid to high teens IRR over a 5 to 7 year hold. And so, realistically, we're looking at like 16 to 70% IRR on a deal level. Those are the returns that we're shooting for. And again, we've exceeded those returns, basically every year and on every exit that we've done. But again, the quality of product is a little higher that we're buying, but also the competition is quite a bit higher. So like you can't buy parks at the same price points that you were able to buy them for, 10 years ago when we were buying this stuff. So it's just a different business model today. And I'm not saying you can't go find a one-off small park somewhere, in a secondary market that you can just knock it out of the park and maybe get lucky and find your way to 30 or 40% returns, IRRs.
Mhm.
But like it's few and far between. That's not a scalable model anymore to think that you could do that over and over and over again.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that you mentioned was the stigma around mobile home parks, and I used to
Mhm.
have the same thing until uh, I started looking into the asset class. And then there's one about maybe 10 minutes west of where I live, where they have their own marina and they're right on the water. It's like a nice, really desirable place to live.
Yep, absolutely. No, I like to say that, there's three different buckets of mobile home parks. There's three different buckets of single family homes as we know them. There's three different buckets of apartment homes, right?
Mhm.
The low end bucket of all three is the wrong part of town, right?
Right.
Drugs, sex, rock and roll, and that exists with single family homes. That exists with apartment complexes, but also that exists with mobile home parks, right? All
Yeah.
three of those types of living, they exist in the bad part of town. You've got the blue collar, hardworking part of town, right, where folks just they
Mhm.
want their kids to go to a good public school. You've got dual working households, and they just want a clean, safe, and quiet place to live, right? You've got single family home subdivisions in those types of areas. You've got apartment complexes in those areas, and you've got mobile home parks, and you even got high
Right.
end stuff, right? Like you're talking to, a mobile home park with a marina. That might, we've got a lot of stuff like that down here in Florida, and a lot of those communities aren't actually even affordable housing. I mean, they're pretty expensive to live in, and they're people seek them out because of the lifestyle element associated with them, right? And so lots of
Mhm.
second homes, snowbirds live in those. But you got the same thing with apartments and homes as well, right? You got higher end
Yeah.
stuff, and so, but unfortunately, mobile home parks kind of get lumped in that bad bucket. All of them do, but that's just not the truth.
Yeah. For sure. I think a lot of it has to do with unknowns and people really not seeing them and being able to see the different types of products that are out there. So you also mentioned these heavier, I guess, turnarounds. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, I mean, a heavier turnout is just something that's been mismanaged severely for many, many years. I mean, it could have a multitude of factors. I mean, one could be, could have a major vacancy issue. I'll maybe use an example of 100 space community, but maybe there's only 50 of the lots that are actually occupied with homes. Another factor there could be, maybe there's some additional homes in that park, but they're all abandoned and vacant and they all need renovated, which is very capital intensive. Turnaround could also be just the demographic you're serving. It could be a park that's in a great market, but like maybe the person that ran it, never did credit screening, never let just to let anyone in. Anyone that had money could fog a mirror. They were allowed to move there,
Mm.
and now you've got an entire community full of not so stellar people that are crime ridden and just attracting the wrong element to the community. You've also got infrastructure issues, right? You got water lines that might need to be replaced. You got sewer lines that might need to be replaced. Sewer systems that might need upgraded or replaced. Um, there's just a multitude of factors there when I mean a heavy value add turnaround. But a lot of it comes down to infrastructure, but also capital projects, new roads, renovation of homes, bringing brand new homes into the community, things that cost a lot of money and time and quite a bit of time to actually to see them through. Many years typically to actually turn it from what it was to what it could be. Lots of time,
Mhm.
energy, and effort to get there. So, I mean, again, a value add or a major turnaround or a heavy lift could have a multitude of factors, but typically they're just timely and costly, but they're in a good area. That's the one thing they normally have going for them. They're in a good area, and meaning that
Mm.
if I can get rid of the bad element that's in there, I can get rid of the wrong tenant base, I can inject money back into it and make it pretty again. And I know that if I do that, there's plenty of really good, hardworking people that live in this area that want to live in this area, that want to send their kids to the schools in this area, that will line up waiting to fill out applications to live in this community. So.
Yeah. What kind of team does it take to get to actually run like a 50 to 100 pad mobile home park?
I mean, as far as the team, I mean, just to run it the day to day, I mean, that size of a community in our portfolio is going to have one community manager. A 50 space park doesn't even really need a full time community manager. But again, there's some nuance to that, and there's variables that come into play. For example, even a 100 space community, if it's 100% resident owned homes, meaning the residents own 100% of the homes, it's a very well maintained community. It's in a good part of town. It's got a mature tenant base. Typically mature tenant bases, they pay their rent on time, like clockwork, each and every month, right? And so
Mhm.
and if that community doesn't really have any amenities, it doesn't have swimming pools, it doesn't have a lot of common area. There's just not a lot of things to keep up with. Um,
Mhm.
and so that 100 space community could be potentially run by one definitely a full time or definitely part time, but might not need to be full time, right? Maybe 30 hours a week person that will oversee the day to day, enforcing rules, collecting rents, depositing, scanning checks, and just dealing with the day to day nuances of running a property. Whereas if that 100 space community on the flip side, let's say it's a 100 space mobile home community, but all the homes that are in there are rental units. They're all owned by the park owner and they're rental units.
Mhm.
Well, that's a very different animal. Now you've got a 100 space apartment complex basically, and you've got tenants that are coming and going, right? They don't live there. They might live there for a 12-month duration, maybe a little longer, but you've got a lot of turnover. And every time you turn a unit, you've got someone or you've got a unit that's going to need, probably new paint, new carpet. It's going to need leased out, right? You're going to have to market it and lease it. And so you got to show the home. You got to take applications. You've got a lot more moving parts. And so that community it might have a full-time manager and a part-time manager and a full-time maintenance guy. And maybe even a groundskeeper on top of that, right? You could have four people running that 100 space community because it's a different structure than the original example I gave, where it's
Right.
100% resident owned. So again, for us, most of our communities, until we get, I'd say most most of our communities that are 150 spaces or smaller, we don't have more than one manager.
Okay.
And we might have a person that maintained like a groundskeeper, depending, but a lot of times we even outsource that because it just makes more sense than having it on payroll.
Mhm.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, our largest single community, it's huge. It's a beast. It's 738 sites. Um, in that community, we have a lot of things going on. We've got a full time manager. We've got two assistant managers. All three of those individuals are full time. So we got three full time managers that operate that community. On top of that, we've got two full time maintenance personnel, and then we've got three full time groundskeepers. And then lastly, we've got two full time sales and leasing agents because we're bringing in a lot of new homes and selling homes in that community. So we've got quite a big staff that runs that respective community, but it's got a lot of different things happening there. We've got new homes that we're bringing in and selling. So we've got
Mhm.
dedicated sales people, but then even just the day to day operations of 700 plus sites, it truly requires a team effort to get it done.
Right. I mean, it's a huge community. I think the community I live in is about 600 some houses. And so I can't imagine having to deal with that and manage all that. You said that you're selling some of these homes. Are you trying to convert your parks to or this park to be all um, tenant, I guess, owned, or are you doing a portion of it where you have renters and a portion of them where you have owners?
Both. When we bought this community, we acquired we acquired I think there's about 60 vacant sites. So out of the 738, there's 60 that don't have any homes on them at all.
Mhm.
And then of the remaining what's that, 670 give or take occupied sites, about 120 of those were rental units when we acquired it from the prior ownership. So they, and then the remaining out of that were all resident owned homes. And so we're trying to convert. We have a conversion program in place. We're trying to convert those renters into homeowners. And
Mhm.
normally if we achieve about 15 to 20% success rate there, we're doing really well. Or when that lease turns over, if that renter turns over, we'll put that home up for sale. We won't re-rent it again. So we are converting the existing rentals. It will take years to convert them all. 5, 6 years to convert them all. But then on top of that, we're bringing brand new homes in and filling in those vacant 60 plus sites that had mentioned. So we're bringing a handful of homes in on a regular basis to sell to make available for sale, brand new home for sale. And so that's the reason why we have those sales and leasing agents, because they're
Mhm.
showing existing homes that we have. They're working on the conversion program with the renters, and then they're also showing these brand new homes that we're bringing in.
Okay, so is that a model that you take on for every single one of your parks, or do you have some where you just keep all renters and some where you are
Yeah.
selling off the homes?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have any rentals at all in our portfolio.
Mm.
Uh, we've got a number of communities where we have zero rentals, and then we've got some where we have a lot. I think in our entire portfolio, we've got about 3,500 lots that we have under ownership, and I think we've got about 350 homes. And so about 10% of our total portfolio is made up of rental units. Some communities have zero, others have quite a bit. Um,
Mm.
we like the resident owned model for many reasons. Number one, your repairs and maintenance expenses are significantly less.
Yeah.
The second being it's a lot less intensive to manage. Again, you don't have continual turnover. With a resident owned home that you do with a renter, a renter is going to come and go on a 12, 18-month basis. I mean, that's just a reoccurring cycle. Whereas we've got homeowners that have lived in some of our communities for 3, 4 decades, right? 30, 40 years. And so when they own the home, they become much more of a sticky resident. They don't come and go that often. This is their community. This is their neighborhood. And some of them live there for decades and decades. So we like that sticky resident. We want that person that's going to stay there not just for 12 or 18 months, but for 12 or 18 years. And then lastly, when they're a resident versus that of a renter, you'll find that they typically will have a much higher pride of ownership. I mean, they're going to put a flag outside, they're going to plant flowers.
Mm.
They're going to maintain their unit much different than that of just a renter that's literally just needs four walls and a roof to live in for the next 12 months. So for all those reasons, we really like the resident owned model than that of the renter model. But again, as I mentioned, we've got a lot of rentals inside our portfolio, but most of those are only there as a result of that's how the prior ownership might have run the community, and we
Mm.
just basically acquired it that way. But we're looking to convert it over time.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest things about mobile home parks that I like is because you can help someone get into home ownership, but also reduce your own repairs and maintenance and
Yep,
own headaches.
that's right.
So are you for the when you're selling these I guess buildings, are you taking them on as like are you seller financing them or are you having them go through uh traditional mortgage?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's some legal restrictions around owner financing. You got Dodd-Frank, which is I'm not going to go into detail here, but what that is. But ultimately, it's a government regulatory law that got passed during, I believe, the Obama administration. But
Mm.
it prohibits how many homes that you can actually finance in-house without being a licensed or a certified loan originator and having someone on your team that's licensed. And so it's a big headache to do it legally. Lots of
Mhm.
people still do it illegally. We prefer to follow the confines of the law. And so for that reason, we work with third-party outside lenders. There's a number of lenders in our industry that will finance applicants and home buyers that have decent credit, to have good income, and so that's the route we go. We leverage that's their business model. Their lenders, they have the money, they'll finance, and we really don't want to carry it on our balance sheet. We'd prefer just to be cashed out, get our money, collect our lot rent, but
Mhm.
get cashed out of actually having that home sit on our balance sheet for many years.
It makes sense. Okay, so then I'm curious how you got into parking garages. Like, how do you own a parking garage?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I always kind of keep my ears open, for new potential opportunities. I've always been one to go against the herd. Like, back when we started buying mobile home parks, it wasn't a common or popular thing, and a lot of people questioned why I was buying mobile home parks. That just again because of the stereotype that existed. But ultimately, now look at
Right.
today, everyone wants to buy mobile home parks. So,
Mhm.
parking, came across my radar about 7 years ago. I was interviewing a guy on my podcast. I quite often interview folks in unique, sometimes niches, and happened to interview a guy that owned parking lots and parking garages, and I was very intrigued with the model. Had never known anybody, had never spoken to anybody that owned parking investments before, and so just it was a fun interview. But I was very intrigued by the model. I saw it as a potential opportunity, and it was just one of those things that after I got off the interview, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I called him up a second time, called him up a third time, flew him to Tampa where I live and spent a day with him to pick his brain to understand the industry more. And I spent about 2 years diving deep into the industry to try to understand it. Went to association events, industry conferences, and we didn't pull the trigger until about 5 years ago on the first parking investment. But it's just that it's a way for us to buy what we like to classify as irreplaceable real estate. So the parking investments we own are in core downtown central business districts and incredibly fast growing cities, and they sit on a plot of land that truly what I feel is irreplaceable. But there's still a high demand for parking to where the numbers make sense as parking. It's a great cash flow investment as parking. But we know that whether it's in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever it might be, that whenever the day comes where parking might not be the highest and best use, we know that that piece of land, the acre, acre and a half, 2 acres, whatever it might be, is going to have a much higher value as a redevelopment plan. So it's a way for us to have a cash flowing covered land play in just phenomenal cities across the country. So we just closed the one 2 months ago. It's literally in downtown Charlotte. It occupies over an acre of land in downtown Charlotte, a stone's throw to the Spectrum Center, which is where the NBA Hornets call home. It's where all the NBA games are played there in Charlotte. It's where all the big music venues go to play. It's right next to the Bank of America corporate U.S. headquarters, and they use our parking garage. It's right a block away from the Truist U.S. corporate headquarters. They use our parking garage and a litany of other demand drivers, restaurants, bars, entertainment, things like that, hotels, and so it makes a ton of money as parking. And when the day comes when parking isn't the highest and best use, it will have a much higher value just given the location. There's no land left like that in these downtown areas. And so we own in Phoenix, we own in Charlotte, um, we own here in the Tampa area, Clearwater Beach. We're buying one right now downtown Philadelphia and Old Town Philadelphia. Again, highly densely populated areas that just don't. You wouldn't even be able to afford to build for the cost of building today. You wouldn't be able to rebuild any of these parking garages, and parking's actually going away. It's a lot of cities have eliminated the parking requirement minimums from new developments, and so when developers come in to build a new hotel or they build an office building, well, not no one's building office buildings now, but they build a
Mhm.
hotel or a condo tower or a multifamily tower. Historically most municipalities had a formula. Like if you build 1,000 square feet of whatever, you have to put in 1.8 parking spaces. Whatever the formula was, they required them to always put in a certain amount of parking spaces, even if it wasn't
Right.
needed. Um,
Mhm.
and that created a surplus of parking over the last couple of decades. But a lot of cities have removed that minimum requirement. So now what you'll find is that parking is actually diminishing in all these major cities. Like there's parking is going away. It's getting redeveloped, or they're not building it anymore because they make more money by building a residential unit than that of another parking space. And so we
Right.
kind of get this shrinking supply, but we've got these plots of land with parking on it that inevitably are in areas where people need to park and will continue needing to park over the next couple of decades. So it's been a fun asset class. It makes up a minority of our portfolio. We own 5 parking assets at present time, whereas we own uh, I think 16 mobile home parks at current. So most of our focus is still heavily in the manufactured housing space.
Yeah, but the parking garages get are super interesting to me. It's like, first of all, are you buying the land, like just
Yes.
unused land, and then you're just you're doing the construction?
No. No, we're
Oh,
buying existing. We're buying existing
okay.
parking garages or parking lots. We do own a surface parking lot as well, just like a
Mm,
asphalt piece of land in a downtown that's in a prime location. But no, to
yeah.
answer your question, we're not developing new. In fact, that's to my point is that based on construction costs today,
Mm,
you would not be able to rebuild. Like we're basically buying all these for below replacement cost. You would not be able to
gotcha.
rebuild any of these today, and that's just the cost to actually build, not the cost of the
Mm,
actual land itself underneath it.
gotcha. Okay.
And that's assuming if you could do it. Most cities aren't allowing standalone parking garages to be built. So, for example, in Tampa, in Clearwater Beach, where we own a big parking garage, there's a moratorium on parking. Literally, you'll never be able to build another parking garage, a standalone parking garage like we have, ever again there. And there's not enough land to do it anyway, if even if you wanted to do it. So it's just kind of a creates a barrier to entry for us. If we can buy
Right.
these great assets and great locations, great markets, know that there's no more being built, and know that
Mm.
there's incredibly high demand still today for that product, and that it sits on an irreplaceable piece of real estate.
So how are you finding these opportunities to buy these garages?
Yeah, I mean, just like anything else, relationships. We spent, and it's taken us a lot of years to really get traction and get known in the industry as someone that's a real buyer. These are bigger assets typically. The one we just closed was $32 million. These are typically higher priced assets, 20, 25 million, $30 million. And so, it took us a number of years to really get our name out there in the industry. But then on top of that, um, a lot of what we look at doesn't really check off our boxes. Last year we looked at over 100 parking opportunities, made offers on less than 10. I think we made offers on like eight, and we bought one. So, um, it's just talking to a lot of brokers, talking to industry experts, going to conferences, letting folks know who we are and what we do, because there's some big institutional groups. Like if you go to big cities like Chicago or New York or LA, you name it, you're going to find a lot of the parking assets are owned by big institutional groups or like life insurance companies or just um, big publicly traded companies. And so it's either that or you go to like markets like a Charlotte, like there's going to be institutional owners, but then it's either that or it's like a one-off owner. It's a very fragmented niche, and so there's not a lot of groups like ours of our size that are collectively out there looking for parking assets. So really, our job over the last couple of years was educating people who we are, what we do, what we're buying, what kind of checks all of our boxes, and so
Mhm.
now we've got folks that will continually bring us deal flow because there's not a lot of other groups like out there like us that are actively seeking out parking investments.
Yeah, because that's not something that I hear anybody talking about. I mean, you hear
No,
people talking about everything else, self-storage, mobile home parks, RV parks, but no one talking about parking.
that's right. I've always been one to go against the herd. I think there's opportunity if you're willing to open your eyes and not just follow what the herd is doing. I mean, you can make money with the herd as well, but typically going against the grain is going to get you there a little faster. It might take a little longer to find what it is,
Mhm.
but it'll get you there a little faster. I mean, so anyway, yeah, just our parking assets have performed incredibly well, and we buy everything right. I mean, like some things that we haven't bought over the years because we couldn't get it at the right price, right? I mean, so we're not
Mhm.
overpaying for the stuff. We're buying it with a margin of safety. We're buying it at, it's cash flowing from day one. There's additional value add levers that we can pull to generate more revenue, and it's been a great investment vehicle for us.
So are these typically getting acquired cash or creative?
I mean, there's lenders. I mean, we'll like the last deal we just closed in Charlotte. I think we had a 65% loan to value loan on it.
Okay.
There's a number of banks that like this asset class.
Okay.
Not a lot, but there's a lot of life insurance companies that will lend on it as well. So there's definitely debt out there for these parking investments.
Mhm.
So that this last one was 65% debt and 35% equity.
And what's your typical return on something like this?
Yeah, I mean the one we just bought a couple months ago, but our projected return over a 5 year span of time will be roughly a 70% IRR.
Jeez.
Yeah, so 70% on a core asset. I mean, it's literally
Yeah.
again that's typical. That's not typical. Normally, if you're looking at a core plus asset, like you're probably expecting more, probably along the lines of like 10 or 11% IRRs, maybe 12%
Gotcha.
IRRs. So I mean,
Okay.
this was a very very complicated deal, probably one of the more complicated deals I've ever been involved in, where it was next to an office building and then next to a hotel, and all three of those assets were tied underneath one loan. And
Hmm.
that loan was in default because the office building lost like a big tenant that occupied 80% of the space.
Hmm.
And it threw the whole property collectively into special servicing. And so we had to creatively find buyers for the other two pieces and split it while we were going through the, the, the due diligence and closing process. And so it was a very tricky one, but we got it done. And everyone closed. That we found an office buyer that wanted to buy the office. They're converting it to 280 multifamily units. They're a really prominent group out of Chicago that does this on a big scale. We found a buyer for the off or for the hotel portion. That's a local buyer that owns hotels in the area, and then all we wanted was a garage. That's the piece we wanted. That's so we got what we wanted and found other buyers for the other aspects, and yeah, ended up buying it at a great price. So we bought it for 31.2 million. Again, it's a great condition. Um, Literally doesn't need hardly it doesn't need anything. I mean, it's in phenomenal condition. It was only built back in like the 90s, so it's not all that old. And Charlotte doesn't get cold. Charlotte doesn't get snow really or anything like that. So it's not, it doesn't have a lot of decay from like the elements or the harsh weather.
Hmm.
We bought it at 31.2 million. The day of closing, the bank appraisal came in at just shy of 37 million, as is with in-place
Nice.
financials, and that's before we do our thing. And the rates are a little low than what they should be, so we're adjusting the rates, putting some new equipment in, have some additional parking contracts, have some additional expenses that we're able to shave off that were kind of overinflated with the last operator. So we'll be able to probably squeak out, somewhere in a 5 year span, it'll probably be worth, in the 38, $39 million range, give or take. And that's based on a conservative exit cap rate as well, assuming rates don't go down and cap rates don't compress.
But I mean, the reason why you're able to get such a killer deal is because there was a huge problem and you were able to
That's
solve
it.
it. Yeah.
That's it. I would tell you that there was many times I did not. If you'd asked me if that was going to close, it was not going to close.
Hmm.
It was very complicated, but yeah, we get made. I always say that we get paid well because we can solve complex real estate problems. So if you can just get really good at identifying problems and being the person
Yeah.
that can actually solve them, and we didn't solve that one by ourselves. I mean, so I'm not going to take all the credit for it, but I think that's where it comes down to being resourceful. Like, don't think that you're going to be the guy that's going to actually be the one that can come up with the
Hmm.
solution. Identify the problem, and then bring the other people in that can help you actually create the solution for it. So we brought a multitude of other folks in that were really great at their craft and what they do, and they helped us
Hmm.
collectively solve this problem together. Us alone, it would have never closed. We wouldn't have got the deal done. So it was really the team that we surrounded ourselves with that really got it to the finish line.
Yeah, I mean that's a great piece of information right there. Because a lot of times, especially when we're getting started, you always have to think that you have to be the one that does everything, but it's not possible. Not for these large, especially not for these larger opportunities.
Yeah, no, not possible at all. So no, it's definitely a team effort for sure. But yeah, so solving complex problems is the name of the game. Every parking deal that we purchased, except one, has been an incredibly complex transaction, in one form or fashion or another. And we don't need to go into the show, but but I think that's why ultimately we became the buyer on all, on most of those, is because of us willing to step up and get it sorted out. And honestly, it cost a lot of money. We ended up having about $1 million that went hard on the Charlotte deal before we were 100% that we were going to be able to pull it off exactly how we needed to. I mean, that's you got to be willing to kind of put your cojones on the table, right? And say, like, I'm going to get this deal done. I've got the right
Yeah,
team. We're going to make it happen. But like, there was some risk there, and some real risk. Like that would have been
yeah.
painful. I would have. I lost sleep for a few weeks, thinking about what if this doesn't
Hmm.
happen. So,
Yeah,
because that comes out of my pocket and my business partner's personal pocket. Like that's not an investor funded, pursuit cost. I mean, that's a
right,
us pursuit cost.
right. Um, okay, so I mean, you've been able to accomplish a ton. You own like 3,500 lots. You have parking garages. Looking back now, is there anything that you would do differently, or any advice you would have given yourself back when you're in your early 20s before the crash?
I think just again, you're only one person. I mean, to think, you get your ego out of the way. Don't think that you're the best at all things, and right, you can do it better than anyone else. I mean, and that wasn't the reason why, I went through the crash or lost things in the crash. But I would say that probably did slow my growth at a period of time, at least in the beginning, when I was,
Mhm.
buying single families and all that. I tried to do everything, right? I didn't know how to actually hire people. I didn't know how to train people. I didn't know how to delegate. And so learning those critical skill sets, and kind of being able to let go, helped us, grow like tenfold. And that's really, it's been a tribute to all of our growth from this point forward. I mean, even our business today looks very different than just 3 years ago. 3 years ago, we had some pivotal growth where now we're bringing in, high C level executives, bringing in, high paid CFOs, bringing in high paid CMOs, like literally guys that have decades of experience and literally are the best at what they do, better than we would ever. Even if I spent all my time, day in, day out, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, studying business, studying finance, even though I build a number of businesses, like I would never be able to do what our CFO does. I don't have the skill set. I don't have the mentality. I don't have his personality. And so surrounding yourself with people that are way smarter than you inside the critical roles of your business will help your business literally take off. And so you can't do it right away, but what you can do right away is, again, start learning to let go a little bit, put systems and processes in place, things that can be trained easily, things that can be delegated to other folks, and do that sooner rather than later. Even that very first hire that you need to make it sooner rather than later, because I made the same mistake. Everyone makes the same mistake. You always end up hiring in a reactive state once you're out of time, once you're stressed out, once your wife is leaving you, because literally all you do is work, right? And you should have hired someone a while ago, and it's a tough pill to swallow, because most of the time when you make that first hire, you probably just started paying yourself. And it's tough. You've been grinding away, and now you're just
Mhm.
finally starting to make some money yourself. But guess what? Now that you got to hire somebody, a portion of that you're making yourself's got to go to pay that person, and that's a tough pill to swallow, right?
Mhm.
And so you never do it until literally you're completely out of time, you're stressed beyond, beyond means, and now you're going to make that hire, probably the most critical hire you've ever made, and you're going to do it in a stressful state, in a reactive state, and hopefully make the right hire. A lot of times people don't. They just bring someone on board right away. They don't make sure they're the right fit. And then on top of that, they just overload them with a bunch of BS. Like they tried to take everything off their plate and throw it on their plate, on the new
Mhm.
person's plate.
Yeah.
And then that person fails miserably, right? They're not
Yeah.
set up for success. And so I would say just get really good, learn about scaling a company, learn about hiring the right folks, identifying the right folks, and do it sooner rather than later. So like that, I wish someone had guided me a little better earlier on. I kind of learned by making mistakes.
Mhm.
Um, but going back, if I was going to do it all over again, I would have really put my focus on what's my business look like today? What do I want it to look like? What do I want it to look like in a year, 3 years, and 5 years? But also, what does the organizational chart? Who needs to be a part of the team in order to get there, right? And
Yeah.
then be
Mhm.
be very keen on hiring those people as you hit these different growth milestones. Like, don't wait, hire them, because you'll find that as you get the right talent on the bus, man, your business will absolutely explode. And on top of that, now you got a real business, right? Hopefully, at some
Mhm.
point, it will run without you being there to a certain degree. You can go away for a month if you want, and probably it'll come back to a better business than, when you were there, right? Like, it's just step away and disconnect and let your team do what they do best. So,
Yeah, it's great advice. I think a lot of these most successful people, they're always talking about try to delegate as much as possible, take as much off your plate because there's people that can do things a lot better than you can. And it's
yeah,
that
no,
book, Who Not How, right?
that's right. Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's a great book. It's an
yeah,
excellent read. Definitely a recommended read.
yeah. I'm going through that one again. Yeah, but anyways, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on. How can people reach out to you and work with you?
If you want to learn about our company, a little bit more about what we do at Sunrise, you can go to investwithsunrise.com. We've got a current offering open, but we've also got some white papers on there that you can download for free. One on parking. It's called Parking Lot Profits. It tells you a little bit more intricate level with the business and how we find value there. We've got a white paper on mobile home park investing as well. And we've also got some like case studies of deals that we've done, kind of explaining, what we paid, what we sold it for, but then what the business plan looked like in between. So you can learn quite a bit by just at our company website. You can also listen to my podcast there, Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow. You can also find it on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify, all those other places. And then
Mhm.
lastly, I'm pretty active on social. I mean, mostly on LinkedIn. However, I do spend time on Instagram and Facebook as well. So I always joke and say my last name's pretty unique, and that if you just type in Kevin Bupp on any of those, you'll track me down pretty quickly.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. We'll make sure to have links to the website, the podcast, and your three socials in the description just to make it easier for everyone to find you.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. It was great meeting you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, John. Been a pleasure.